heartfelt post on her Instagram page, Real Messy Igwe, and even shed tears of joy in the attached video. In the video, the actress could be seen checking on her daughter to ensure she was perfectly ready to receive her certificate, as Michelle was lined up with other students from the school. Concerned fans immediately took to the comment section to celebrate her with congratulatory messages. And that's it for now on the News Hour on Biscon Television. Compiled and produced by Alakweju Ajidebo. I'm Stella Opara. Thank you for watching. Hello and welcome to your newspaper review. I am Alakweju Ajidebo. So today on newspaper review, I'm going to begin with The Punch. Today, yes, Friday, October 20, 2023. And for my first story for The Punch newspaper. Supreme Court begins Atiku's appeal against Tinubu Monday. That story is on page 2. Israeli Hamas. US, UK, Germany ask citizens to leave Lebanon. You can read that on page 8. INEC Defense 2023 post says 712 petitions dismissed. That's on page 7. Now, fuel scarcity. NNPCL marketers disagree over supply as queues spread. No supply from NNPCL for over 1 month. Ex-depot price hits 605 naira 8 months. Stop panic buying. There is sufficient product. NNPCL assures Nigerians. Resist drug cartel temptations. Mawa tells NDLEA officials. That's the chairman of NDLEA. The story is on page 24. That's Brigadier General Buba Mawa telling the NDLEA officials to resist drug cartels' temptations. You can read the story on page 24. Presidents appoint new heads of NTA, NBC, 8 audits. That's on page 8. Okada riders shun government ban. Return to restricted Lagos roads. There was the ban on some roads in Lagos State. Now the Okada riders shun government ban. Return to major roads such as the Ojudu Bega, a major road. You can read the story on page 4. And for the last story for The Punch, Sanwo-Olu Abiodun Dangote beat Akintola Williams. Farewell. That's the story is on page 24. Nigeria's first indigenous chartered accountant, and it's on page 24. And I'll be moving on to this day newspaper today, Friday, October 20, 2023, and for my first story for this day newspaper. Federal government EU signed 728 billion agreements to boost education, energy, transport, others. Tinubu seeks to deepen Nigeria-EU relations. Receives EU Energy International Partnership Delegation. The story is on page 5. The federal government and the European Union, that's the EU, yesterday signed a 900 euros, about 728 billion naira financial package to advance Nigerians' green, resilient, digital, inclusive transition, and that's on page 5. Naira depreciates further on parallel markets, now $1,160, and that's on page 8. Bade Augusto, Pioneer Budget Director, dies at 68 in Portugal. With a story on page 10. Israel rallies troops for Gaza invasion. U.S. reviews security in embassies worldwide, and that's on page 5. The Israeli authorities yesterday has ordered troops to be prepared for a ground invasion of Gaza, just as new explosions rattled southern Gaza. And you can read that story on page 5. Presidential elections grand finale begins at Supreme Court Monday. Court lists article Obi APM's appeal. And you can read that story on page 5. The final battles over the disputed presidential election will begin on Monday, that's October 2023, at the Supreme Court. Sanwo-Olu, Abiodun, Dangote orders build Akintola Williams farewell. That's the last story for this day, and you can find that on page 9. And I'll be moving on to New Telegraph. New Telegraph today, Friday, October 20, 2023. CBN, banks credits to economy rises by 46.38% to 92.72 trillion naira. And you can read that on page 3. Federal government EU unveil 728 billion naira package to deepen relationship. That's on page 8. With 80% citizens in poverty, insecurity will be hard to eradicate. That's according to Governor Sonny, and that story is on page 26. Fuel scarcity caused by reduced depot load at in Papa, says NNPCL. That's on page 4. FIRS to first. 18% tax to GDP ratio won't lead to tax increases. 10th, NAS can use tax reform to boost economy. That's on pages 3 and 5. Tinubu Obaseki orders mourn as Bode Augusto dies at 68. And you can read that story on page 25. 891 dismissed withdrawn petitions prove 2023 polls credible, and that's according to INEC. Independent National Electoral Commission releases petition status report on elections. Says petitioners mostly challenge eligibility, candidate nomination, not polls conduct. Supreme Court to hear article Obi's appeal against Tinubu's victory Monday. That's on pages 2 and 4. How we recovered 500 billion naira from government agencies. RMAFC. That's on page 4. NCAA 6 aircraft policy won't grow sector. That's according to Bureau. IATA presents certificate to United Nigeria. That's on pages 2 and 30. PDP may sanction Ihedia over absence at Imo Guber rally. You can read that on page 3. Navy arrests 11 stowaways on board ship at Lagos anchorage. Gunmen attack Calabar Correctional Facility, killed officer. You can read that story on pages 6 and 7. Loss of confidence in judiciary recipe for anarchy. Chief Judge Toho. Reps urge federal government to appoint 9 Supreme Court judges. You can read that on pages 3 and 5. President orders withdrawal of FERMA chair's nomination. Appoint Isa Onuli, NOA boss, names DGs for NBC Akon office. And for the last story for New Telegraph study, daytime light exposure linked to depression risk. And you can read that story on page 26, and also the last story for New Telegraph. And I'll be moving on to the next newspaper, which is The Guardian. Today, Friday, October 20, 2023. Varsity sad tales of underfunded, understaffed medical centers. So that's on page 4 and 5. That's a big story. You can read that on pages 4 and 5. And SARS. Activists lament non-implementation of pro-panel recommendations. You can read that on page 6. Review Nigeria's relations with Israel. Sharia Council tells Tinubu. That's on page 3. Tinubu revokes Imam's nomination as FERMA chairman appoints CEOs for parastatals. You can read that on page 7. No respect for Nigerians as petrol scarcity bites harder in Abuja, Lagos, August. You can read that on page 15. Poor leadership may cause World War III, says Afe Babalola, and that's on page 28. For the last story for The Guardian, Supreme Court to hear articles appeal Monday, and that's the last story for The Guardian, and it's on page 3. And I'll be moving on to the Vanguard newspaper, but before I continue with the newspaper review, we'll go on a quick short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with newspaper review. Stay with us. Yes, welcome back. I begin with the Vanguard newspaper today, Friday, October 20, 2023, and for my first story for Vanguard newspaper. Customers depositing banks rise 56.6% to 75.7 trillion naira. That's on page 19. Repairs. Federal government shut third mainland bridge for 24 hours. I think it's a good one to repair the third mainland bridge with the potholes. I think that's a good move. That's on page 10. 2023 post. Tribunals dismissal of 712 petitions. Withdrawal of 179 validate our conduct. That's according to INEC. Tinubu, others known as XDG Budget Office for Day Augusto, died at 68. That's on page 6. Federal government Labour's deal under threat. NLC accuses Lalong of violation. Says federal government never negotiated in good faith. Vows to resist attempts to force new leadership on NURTW. Insists government failure to fully implement agreement will lead to nationwide strike, and that's on page 5. Petrol scarcity. Queues grow longer as depot dry up. That's on page 22. To read up on the fuel scarcity, you can read that on page 22. The Israel-Hamas war, US lists Nigeria under third tier of worldwide travel alert to Americans. And that's on page 8. Israel-Hamas war, Sharia Council, Khan, PFN disagree over Nigeria's war. That's on page 8. Tinubu appoint Isao Nilu, Ali M. Ali, 6 others under Information Ministry. And that's on page 33. Presidential poll. Supreme Court to hear article for this case against Tinubu next Monday. Where I came from. It's clear the human race faces mainly self-inflicted crises which require collective solutions. And that's on page 17. And for the last story for Vanguard, sports section, transfer Newcastle United plan move for Boniface. And that's on page 28 to read about the transfer. And that's also the last story for Vanguard newspaper. I'll be moving on to the last newspaper for today's newspaper review, Friday, 20 October 2023. And for my first story for Daily Trust. Kenya government flagged off foreign prescribed scholarship for 1,000 students. As on page 4. Account for 500 billion naira recoveries, reps tell RMFAC. You can read that on page 19. Atawale, Governor Lawal's food leaves Zamfara civil servant hungry. You can read that on page 3. Industries battle for survival as dollar hit 1,155 naira. Companies relocating to Ghana, retrenching textile manufacturers. Employers recommend guarded float forex regime. One-way flight tickets may eat 130,000 naira. How to rescue Naira, BD sees ex-minister, and that's on page 4. Elections. 891 of 1,196 petitions dismissed or withdrawn. That's according to INEC. That's on page 10. Tinubu withdraws appointment of 24-year-old as FERMA chair. That's on page 6. Diphtheria. Kano tops 15,000 suspected cases recorded in 20 states. Federal Capital Territory. That's the FCT, and that's on page 6. And for the last story for Daily Trust, Nigeria Chinese firms signed $2 billion MOUs, Lekki Deep Blue Seaport contract, and that's on page 5. And also the last story for Daily Trust newspaper. We've come to the end of newspaper review today. Thank you for watching and thank you for joining us. To see more, you can download the Biscon TV app on your Android devices or on your iOS devices. And you can also visit our YouTube channel to get all the latest updates you need on our YouTube channel. On that note, I'll see you next time for another edition of Newspaper Review. I am Olakuju Ajidagon. Have a good day.
I have the history of being an activist and unrepentant protester in the past. And used the statement yesterday, appealing to the conscience of all Nigerians, all the protesters as well. And I sided with them that what they are doing is right. And they have the right to free speech, freedom of association, and freedom to complain. I've done it before. But that they should please call off the protest. That is how I ended my release. You have a copy in channels. And suddenly tonight, I had a call that army had attacked Nigerian soldiers, had attacked the protesters. I was shocked. So, in the process of making all of these inquiries, I started picking numbers. Usually, if I don't have your name, and you imagine, you are talking to me now. If I don't have your name, I won't pick your number. Unless you come through my PA. It's a personal line. But when lives of people are involved, and you in a democracy, you had suddenly that people are being attacked by military or people in military uniform with live bullets. You start to wonder. You are shocked. I am extremely shocked. Okay? And ready to complain to the highest level. There is no way I can talk to the authority or wake them up now. I've tried to reach the NSA. I tried to reach the head of army. You don't call the president at this hour. But I strongly condemn the act. There are other means of settling or dispersing even irritating protest. Why would they use live bullets? They are rubber bullets. We are parents. I condemn this act in no supporting manner.
Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar and former President Olusegun Obasanjo also weighed in on the issue as statesmen, parents and grandparents, with a passionate appeal to the youth to put a stop to the EndSARS protest to give room for a dialogue with the government.
I woke up this morning and did the unusual. I called to speak to all my adult children. I did so because I wanted to be sure that they are safe. I also wanted to be assured that the event of yesterday was a nightmare, but it was real. This is our new normal. As I speak, many parents and homes are in mourning. Their children mowed down in their reports of hospital refusing to treat injured from this horrendous incident. I urge all hospitals, private and public, to prioritize the Hippocratic Oath and treat every and all of the injured. To save their lives is a task that must be prioritized. I call on our armed forces to show restraint. No more lives must be lost. Absolutely none. We must face our common enemies. Young people have been trying to draw our attention to their grievances by way of the NSAS movement. Sadly, it reached a violent crescendo yesterday with the unprovoked killing of unarmed and peaceful protesters, even while they demonstrated their patriotism by singing the national anthem. I am heartbroken at this turn of events and deeply condole with the families of the victims. I feel their pains.
It is with a heavy heart and a deep sense of concern about the ongoing violence, chaos, and unrest in many parts of Nigeria that I make this appeal to the government and people of our dear country, Nigeria, to eschew violence and embrace peace and dialogue in finding solutions to the challenges we face as a country. I particularly appeal to President Muhammadu Buhari in his capacities as President of Nigeria, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, and as a parent of youth like the ones who have in the last week or so come out in peaceful protest against police brutality and for improvement in their lives and their living conditions, to restrain the military and other security agencies from using brute force as a way of ending the crisis. The shooting and murder of unarmed protesters, no matter the level of provocation, has never been effective in suppressing public anger and frustration. Instead, such actions only reinforce the anger and frustration of the populace and close the window of dialogue and peaceful resolution. It is clear that Mr. President and his lieutenants did not exhaust the opportunities for dialogue with the protesters before resorting to use of force. It is worse that there is denial of wrongdoing in spite of overwhelming visual evidence. Great harm has now been done, but it can be stopped before it completely spirals out of control.
Hello, Nigerians. It has become necessary for me to address you, having heard from many concerned Nigerians and having concluded a meeting with all the security chiefs. I must warn those who have hijacked and misdirected the initial, genuine and well-intended protest of some of our youth in parts of the country against the excesses of some members of the now disbanded Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS. On Monday, 12th October, I acknowledge the genuine concerns and agitations of members of the public regarding the excessive use of force by some members of SARS. The choice to demonstrate peacefully is a fundamental right of citizens as enshrined in Section 40 of our Constitution and other enactments. But this right to protest also imposes on the demonstrators the responsibility to respect the rights of other citizens and the necessity to operate within the law. As a democratic government, we listened to and carefully evaluated the 5-point demands of the protesters. And having accepted them, we immediately scrapped SARS and put measures in place to address the other demands of our youth. On approving the termination of SARS, I already made it clear that it was in line with our commitment to the implementation of extensive police reforms. Sadly, the promptness with which we have acted seems to have been misconstrued as a sign of weakness and twisted by some for their selfish, unpatriotic interests. The result of this is clear to all observers. Human lives have been lost, acts of sexual violence have been reported, 2 major correctional facilities were attacked and convicts freed, public and private properties completely destroyed or vandalized, the sanctity of the palace of a peacemaker, the Oba of Lagos, has been violated. So-called protesters have invaded an international airport and in the process disrupted the travel plans of fellow Nigerians and our visitors. All this executed in the name of the End SARS protests. I am indeed deeply pained that innocent lives have been lost. These tragedies are uncalled for and unnecessary. Certainly, there is no way whatsoever to connect these bad acts to legitimate expression of grievance of the youth of our country. The spreading of deliberate falsehood and misinformation through the social media in particular, that this government is oblivious to the pains and plight of the citizens is a ploy to mislead the unwary within and outside Nigeria into unfair judgment and disruptive behavior. On the contrary, both our deeds and words have shown how committed this administration has been to the well-being and welfare of citizens, even with the steadily dwindling revenues and the added responsibilities and restrictions due to the coronavirus pandemic. Government has put in place measures and initiatives principally targeted at youth, women, and the most vulnerable groups in our society. These included our broad plan to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in the next 10 years. The creation of 75 billion Naira National Youth Investment Fund to provide opportunities for the youth and the micro, small, and medium enterprises survival fund, through which government is A, paying 3 months' salaries